It is 5:30, and I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education. Please, if you're able, stand and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next, I would look for a motion to approve our agenda. Mr. Johnson?
I'll move to approve the agenda with the addition of the human capital addendum to be added to item 6C that was located at our work location.
Second.
Thanks. Moved by Mr. Johnson, seconded by Ms. Day. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion carries. We'll next move on to our recognition of the audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. This evening, 2 speakers have signed up to address the board. Each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. I will now call our first speaker to the podium, who is Devin Stachinsky.
Before I start, Anne Marie, are you keeping time? The thing's not hooked up. Okay. Good evening. For those of you who are curious as to the endorsements from the teachers union, I'd like you to consider a few things. One of them being the constant, let's just say the appearance of belligerence towards them. None more prevalent than the nice landmine that was placed down last week, or last meeting, by Jim, outright calling Grant a liar. So if you're curious why they would think about endorsing someone who is of different mindset, it's possibly that they see no inroads with you guys. Now, onto the fun news that we found out. Well, I wouldn't really call it fun, but I'm really questioning the district's desire now to not inform parents, given some of the news that came out recently involving a former employee that is a twice former employee of a member of administration. Now, I'm going to say this as calmly, bluntly as possible. Is the district running a school district, or as we've seen 6 times in the last 3 years, running cover for pedos? Honestly, 6 in the last 3 years. I think the board needs to take a very, very hard look at the hiring practices and requirements set forth by administration. As a quick note, because I said I'd talk about Memo 123 real quick, I also noted that secondary students, the majority of them do not feel safe in the school. Also, see previous comments, because that might be part of it. Thank you.
Our second and final speaker is Paul Moore.
Okay, Paul Moore, Fargo School District. And I was kind of wondering how many people would be watching tonight, knowing that it's like this is the last full meeting before the election stuff comes. And then all these people showed up. I'm like, wow, cool. I think everybody has the same amount of time. I think that's part of the law, is that everybody has the same amount of time to review the stuff that comes out on the agenda. I was looking at the 200 pages of really detailed information that came out for this meeting. And like the safety committee thing that's going to come up and the facility plan. A lot of information, a lot of stuff to digest. And I'm wondering, as a holiday weekend, I've discovered in my somewhat extensive period of life that, am I working to live or living to work? So, I spent my whole weekend with my family and not looking at anything until today. The holiday weekend, and so this stuff came out late Friday, so basically you maybe had a couple of hours to review it. And I was wondering if it did the people justice, whether or not, everybody had the right amount of time to look at everything, and so that they could say, okay, is what the decisions that are being made, is that the right thing to do? I was just wondering if there was a suggestion to be made, and I know nobody will do it, but because I kind of said one thing was like silence ends up being approval. I've heard it said that, well, if the school board wants to stop me, they will. And then nobody says anything, so that's silence is approval. So the words, I can put them out here because I moved to move memo 123 and 126, the safety committee report and the facilities plan, both to regular business, and then table it until the next meeting in order to review all the data. That's all that has to be said. And then you can vote. Because I was wondering, like, for example, the $300+ million that we're still asking for in the facilities plan. I mean, have we thought that? I looked quickly through the facilities plan because I was on a committee, so I have a decent idea what I'm expecting in the first place. But then, if you didn't see some of that data, did it get enough review? Did it, it's suddenly, half the schools in order to save the money in 5 years instead of 20. So, we're going to be asking for a lot of money from a lot of different people. And I'm just wondering if we've given it enough time to actually look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our reports section of the agenda, beginning with the FEA report. If we have Mr. Kraft here, thank you.
Well, thank you, President Birkeland and members of the board. In a recent FPS newsletter article, board member Seth Holden wrote about an idea that the board had proposed to FEA leadership for ongoing negotiations. And he writes in that article, the FEA was not able to support a negotiations advisory committee. Contrary to what is implied in the article, we are willing to collaborate. The organization that I represent is very much willing to collaborate. We wanted to ensure that the format of this advisory committee, and we had some inside jokes back and forth about the name and what it should actually be called. We struggled to come up with an actual name, but we wanted to be ensure whatever this becomes, that the format is helpful to all parties. The FEA Executive Board, our governing body, felt that there is already a defined process for negotiating directly with the board. And instead of creating a new avenue to conduct essentially negotiations, a better use of the time of board members, administrators, and FEA members would be to have these parties in the schools before or after student contact time to be able to hear the successes, the needs, and the concerns of staff, especially as it relates to the negotiated agreement. That was the FEA Executive Board idea, or you might say proposal, back to the board. Over the course of several months, discussions were had between board members and FEA leaders that indicated the format suggested by the FEA Executive Board was the right direction and could be implemented. I could draw my own conclusions as to why this has not been implemented yet, and I could even point fingers as to who I would find responsible. It does no good, however, to publicly claim that any party isn't fully on board or not able to support collaborative efforts. In my term as FEA president, one of the most significant lessons I've learned is that people want to be seen and heard. To that end, I've done my very best to respond to members in a timely manner. When taking phone calls, I try to listen intently, speak directly, and respond with honesty. I worked collaboratively with district administrators to establish face-to-face listening sessions where educators could express successes and challenges on varying topics. I worked collaboratively with the FEA building reps to establish a face-to-face event in each building where educators could discuss their successes and concerns directly to FEA leadership. And most recently this spring, we put together 2 social events to recognize and celebrate the efforts we've seen in our members throughout the year. I believe that these actions demonstrate my, but more importantly, our organization's commitment to ensuring that members are seen and heard. More work needs to be done to ensure educators are not only seen and heard by their professional association, but by other leaders throughout the system as well. Thus, the Executive Board remains steadfast that its suggested format for collaboration on negotiations in the off term is both appropriate and should be implemented. But if the board takes issue with that format, they should consult FEA leadership and continue collaborative efforts to find an alternate format that accomplishes the goals of each party, rather than casting blame on the FEA for not being on board or able to support collaborative efforts of the board. I'm confident that the Executive Board will continue its good work well after my time in leadership of FEA has come to an end. This Friday will conclude my 9th year as a teacher, all of which have been in Fargo Public Schools, primarily as a Latin teacher. Each spring for the last 9 years, I've packed up my classroom, taken down the Roman statues, putting away the examples of Roman coins and pottery and oil lamps. This work is necessary to prepare the classroom for summer cleaning and readying the classroom for the fall. It's completed by every teacher across the district each spring. And every year I find myself reflecting on all that the year had brought and also considering what changes I would like to make to improve my art of teaching when the fall arrives. However, this year has been different. For me, there will be no next year, as I have made the decision to resign from the district. Some have asked me about my decision to resign and often describe it in the same way. Why are you leaving teaching? They might ask. Or how do you feel about leaving teaching? And each time I hear that phrase, leaving teaching, it's unsettling to me. And I think it's because, to me, that phrase somehow implies that I have lost my passion for educating the next generation. But I am just as passionate today, if not more, for the special calling I felt when I first decided to begin studying education and preparing to teach. Rather, I have come to recognize that the experience of teachers today is not what I was called into, nor what I have been trained to do. In short, teaching has left me. I could use this time to lament and decry the ways in which teaching has left me or has changed over the past decade. My colleagues could illustrate even more with their breadth of experience. However, the reality is none of it would be new to you. The board and administration has endured me speaking at you on a multitude of concerns throughout my varied leadership roles in FEA. You know the biggest concerns of educators, and you must take steps to address those. Now, despite all the topics on which I've advocated for needed changes over the years, and despite the many topics that still need to be addressed, I am truly grateful for the time I have been at Fargo Public Schools, during which I've had the privilege of serving my students and their families. I have also had privilege to work alongside incredible colleagues who I wish I could take with me. There are far too many people who have helped me become the teacher and leader I am today, to name each of them individually. But throughout my time in Fargo Public Schools, my colleagues have been the consistent source of help, inspiration, encouragement, and support. I know that I'm leaving many good people behind, and I take solace in knowing that they will continue to advocate for Fargo Public Schools to be the best that it can be. On Friday, I will hand the keys of the FEA office over to Laura Haugen Christensen, who has a demonstrated record of advocacy and is ready to help lead our organization and the district forward. As for me, I look forward to continuing to support the work of educators across the state in my new role. And while Fargo will no longer receive my full attention, I am certain that as a citizen of this district, as a product of this district, that today will not be the last time that I stand to deliver remarks from this podium. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll move on to section B, our administration report, and I believe we'll start with Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. As you see on the agenda, we do have a presentation from our safety committee, but prior to that, we also wanted to take this time to recognize some individuals that are going to be members of one of the many different teacher pipeline programs that we are starting or have begun to or have started here in Fargo Public Schools. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Jeff McCann, our Human Capital Officer, to talk through the program and make some introductions.
Madam President, Dr. Gandhi, members of the board, cabinet, we currently have 13 para-to-teachers that started in August to get their teaching credentials. In conversations with them, we realized we have more paras in our district, more paraprofessionals, more PBIs, more PBTs that wanted to become teachers. So we worked to write a grant for the second cohort, and we got funded for $300,000, that cohort. We had a meeting a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, where we thought we might have maybe the 15 or 16 people show up for the funding that we secured. 5 elementary, 5 secondary, 5 special ed. And we ended up having close to 40 members, the Fargo School District that showed up. And so I didn't have the heart to tell the third group no. So we connected with WGU that evening, and we worked Friday and the weekend to hopefully get funded for the next grant that is due June 1st. We're done with it, and we'll find out funding for July 1st. But we did, for this current grant, we have 15 of our staff members that are employees in Fargo Public Schools. And I'm going to ask them to stand. Not all of them could make it tonight, but if you all could come to the podium. I did share with them they each would have to give a speech. They're hearing that now. But I'm super excited because this group, the first one of the funding we were working with didn't get funded. So we pulled up our bootstrings and jumped back in the saddle. And so I'm going to ask them if they would. Again, not all of the 15 could be here this evening, but I'm going to ask them if you'll indulge me to share their name and their location. And I just want to thank them in front of everybody for working in FPS, for committing to not only continuing to work in FPS, but being a future educator in Fargo Public Schools. And we're going to be here to support you, not just in getting this fully funded opportunity where they will get a bachelor's degree. And a lot of them, if they so choose, can get dual certification. So you can kick it off, just first name, last name, and then the school you're from.
All right. My name's Philip Mayer, and I'm from Explorer Academy.
My name is Patrick Burgess, and I'm from Explorer Academy.
I am Jesus Gonzalez over at Madison Elementary.
I'm Jennifer Briggs, and I'm next door at Hawthorne.
My name is Serafina Bossel, and I work at Ben Franklin.
I'm Naomi Canamar, and I work at Eagles.
My name is Courtney Padratz, and I work at Eagles.
My name is Esma Chicos, Centennial Elementary.
My name is Umita Chicos. I am from Davis High School. Thank you very much.
And the last one. I am Desiree Hoyt, and I'm from Centennial.
So again, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Gandhi, Cabinet, not everybody could be here this evening. We do have the next round, if it's approved, and I feel like our application's even better than the last round, they're fully committed. So if it's all right, I will invite that next group. And I do want to give a shout out to all of them for coming, but Jesus, can you stand? Because Jesus we were working on just getting him here, and he got here. And just a few minutes ago, I said, it's all right, we'll get you at the next board meeting. But
I was a little lost for a moment, but it works.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. Oh, one other thing. I didn't mention this. We also have, in addition to the 3 pipelines where we'll have 45 teachers, we also put out an American Board Scholarship, and we have 9 that are in various positions that are not teaching in the district that are going to got fully funded American Board. So on top of those 45, we'll have 9 more.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. I'm speechless. Thank you all so much. Congratulations. And thank you, Dr. McKenna, for all of your hard work and efforts for this. This is so heartwarming.
I did tell them they could stay if they so chose.
But yes, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I just wanted to tell the board, so first off, thank you to all of our our current educators that will also be future teachers in Fargo Public Schools for being with us tonight. But I also just wanted to thank the board. As mentioned earlier, this is the end of the last school, this is the last week of school for this school year. But as most of you know, this is also the last week of any school year that's been utilizing federal relief COVID funds for the last 3 years. And I'm not sure how many people actually geek out on educational news as much as I do, but if you look at what's happening with school districts across the nation, many school districts are suffering because they have had to make some really hard cuts coming off of ESSER and not being able to sustain some of those programs. That is true for Fargo Public Schools as well. We always have to make some really tough decisions. But one of the things I'm extremely proud of, because of the support of this board and our incredible staff, is that when you look at school districts our size and what we were able to accomplish over the last 3 years, I do fundamentally believe, although I don't have hard data in front of me, that there isn't a school district that has invested in its human capital to the level that we did using our ESSER funds. And when I talk about investing in our human capital, I talk about it in a variety of ways that have not handicapped or created long-term obligations to the district that we couldn't fulfill. We invested in coaching to upskill a lot of our staff and are being able to utilize those with individuals that are able to go back to the classroom for their certain positions. We were able to offer every educator in our school district the opportunity to become dual certified, including in EL and special education, to be able to pursue opportunities maybe in a different certification area that are our highest demand areas. And now we're also able to utilize some ESSER and some other non-grant funds as well to be able to provide over 30 different paraprofessionals in our organization an opportunity to come in and become teachers in Fargo Public Schools. So as we hear a lot about the public narrative around the shortages going into the teaching profession and some other pieces, as I look back at our district funds over the last 3 years and what we were able to do to invest in specifically in human capital in a way that is still going to be sustained down the road and continues to support our profession, I'm just extremely proud of our staff and then our board for your efforts in supporting that as well. So thank you, and thank you to our human capital team as well.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to our Safety Committee Board report, and I believe Ms. Eisnes is going to be presenting for us.
So tonight, I'm very honored to have Janelle Ladberry and Tricia Miller, who are members of the Safety Committee, present an overview of the report that we gave the board last week to review. And we also have Grant Kraft and Tristan Love and Shannon Mortrud here to answer questions at the end if any one of us is better able to answer. So I'm going to turn it over to both ladies here, and thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you. Hi, I am Trish Miller. I am a teacher for Fargo South. I teach 9th through 12th grade ILC. So one of the things with Fargo Public Schools Safety Committee that we want to share importantly with you tonight is our purpose. The purpose of Fargo Public Schools Safety Committee is to address challenges and safety related concerns of the FPS staff. To do this, our objectives as a safety committee are to define safety, identify challenges and solutions, address the needs of students showing complex behaviors in the classroom, and develop recommendations to present to the school board, which we'll have tonight for you. This committee meets monthly, and it consists of staff members from across the district representing a wide variety of roles. The page 7 of your board report has a list of those staff members. Our topics tonight are to share some of those achievements and positive progress, as well as our recommendations and affirmations. First things first, we had to define safety. We talked this over through our committee very intentionally and very analytically. So our definition of safety is a culture of prevention that protects youth and adults from natural hazards or human actions that may cause physical and or psychological harm or affect one's ability to function in school. This definition was very important to us. It allows us to approach safety with a holistic approach, and it's what we used as our lens when we are addressing school initiatives, topics of our safety committee work. One of those topics that we used our definition as our lens was ALICE training. We reviewed ALICE protocols as a committee, talked through what ALICE looks like for our teachers, for our schools, for our students. We asked those probing questions for district leadership regarding implementation and clarification of staff roles. And we reviewed district safety emergency response plan with that ALICE language included in the plan. We reviewed the climate and culture survey reflection, which is a K-12 survey sent out to caregivers, staff, and students. We reviewed the survey's results to provide feedback regarding how safety is impacted in our schools. So I'll let this up on the slide here. I want to explain a few things here. The questions that are up here are not the only questions of the survey. The survey had many questions. We took a look at this with our safety committee lens. First, the definition of safety, and also our positive school climate. So positive school climate is the first line of prevention of school violence. Ensuring students are positively connected to adult in FPS is a first response to establish safe and welcoming environment to all students, which is why we specifically picked a few of these questions to really deeply analyze. As you can see on the screen here, one of the questions we asked is, I am safe at school. And our elementary and secondary students and staff answered this question. We also know that belonging to a school and feeling of belongingness is important prevention to school safety. And this question was asked once again to our elementary, secondary students, as well as staff. I feel like my teachers care about me was asked to the elementary students. Our caregivers were asked relatively the same questions, just maybe not in the same verbiage. Our school provides a safe and learning environment, and you can see the percentages there. And my child has at least one adult advocate in the school. Now, we did talk through what these percentages mean. We talked about what is our maybe moving forward as safety committee, and we'll have some recommendations in that category at the end. Another thing that came from safety committee is also achievement, is that safety listening session and some committee work that came out of that. So we asked this question, What would we be disappointed as a committee if we did not address? That's a great question, except for we needed more information. We needed more of what is going on in our schools. What do we need to address? And so Tristan and Taylor put together a listening session. And during this listening session, concerns were brought to us as safety committee, which we reviewed district protocols and initiatives brought forward in that listening session, and then went into a brainstorming session. From that brainstorming session, a journey article was released, as well as that is in your board report. Another, lastly, one is our review of the Code of Character, Conduct, and Supports. We'll just reference this as the code. We reviewed the draft of the code, recognize the central role of the code is maintaining a safe and respectful school environment. We recognize the importance, thank you, guide effective and appropriate interventions when students do not meet the standards of behavior or when they violate the school rules. Once again, we use safety definition as our lens when going through the code of conduct, code of character, conduct, and supports. This is also linked to your final board report. We did a lot of work, and from a lot of this work comes some recommendations as well as some affirmations.
Good evening. My name is Janelle Stahl-Ladbury, and I'm a school counselor at North High School, and I'm representing the secondary counselors as part of this. So Tricia went through all of the work that we did, and then I get the fun part of giving you all of the recommendations and affirmations of kind of where we see things going. So we'll just first start with the committee makeup. We did have some conversations about how people are selected on the committee, what that looks like, making sure that we have varying roles. We even talked about whether or not it should just be FPS staff or if we should have other stakeholders as part of the committee. And as a group, we decided that really having the staff be the only ones there so that there can be more transparency with some of the data that we're looking at and the concerns. It doesn't mean that we can't look at having other stakeholders present. And then years of experience, new versus veteran teachers, but also new to our district, right? Because there might be veteran teachers that have 10, 15, 20 years of experience, but they're coming from a different area. So we've asked that administration and the FEA president to kind of make sure that we have all of the areas represented, review whether or not we have a committee that best represents our entire district as well as we can. Professional development recommendations. So if you ever ask a teacher how they should be spending, or an educator how they should be spending their first few days of the school year, they'll give you lots of recommendations. But really, as related to the safety committee and defining safety, we thought the rotation of classroom management, trauma-informed de-escalation strategies, and school safety training were absolute of importance. And not just the educators in the classrooms, but all staff members, right? So whether it's somebody in the lunchroom, the paraprofessionals who are working individually with students, the lunch personnel, the custodians, everybody should have an understanding of these protocols within our school. And we know that's a big task when not everybody comes back at the same time, but from a safety perspective, it's important that if we're using certain language or techniques or strategies, that everybody knows what those are when they're being verbalized by administration within each building. And then we also affirmed the ALICE training has been completed. So really, these are the overview areas. We do have, Fargo Public Schools has some great programs that are being used that meet each of these catalysts, UCARO, but we decided not to go with the company name, but instead, these are the strategies that need to be reviewed so that we can stay up to date and current on what are the best practices within our schools. Responsiveness to physical incidents. I think this is really kind of where the safety committee came from to begin with, is a lot of the physical incidents that were occurring and staff members being injured. And so really our goal is we want to recommend that district leadership really create immediate and ongoing protocols for schools regarding staff involved in physical incidents. We know that there's, each administrator has different levels of experience with this. Each school building looks different, but making sure that there's a plan so that teachers know that they're being supported if something happens, that they have an opportunity to debrief with somebody, that they can take a break, that resources are provided to them to access physical and mental health services. We do have a lot of those things provided to us, but if you're not reminded of EAP or different things, how do you know to utilize those things? So just making sure that there are clear and specific protocols that take place so that teachers are feeling supported, not only during the incident, but following the incident also, so that they can go back into the classroom. School safety. Here, we emphasize the importance of annual training for school safety for all staff. I had mentioned that previously. This year, we all went through the ALICE training. There was an online component, and then we had a hands-on training as well. And it was eye-opening, really, to take part in that. And so making sure that all staff members have the ability to participate in those things. We recommended the research and alignment of questions on all of the climate and culture surveys. So if we go back to that data that Tricia brought up, I'm kind of a numbers person. I like to look at statistics and information. And one of the struggles that I had is that we did not have consistent questions across all grade levels and across all stakeholders. So how can we really look and see if kids are feeling safe at school or if they feel like they belong when we don't have the same question being asked of all people? And so really that's a strong recommendation that I have, but also our committee, to align those questions. And I know some of it was pulled from some of the other culture and climate survey, but to have somebody go back and look through and make sure that we're consistent and that we're asking the questions that we need across all grade levels in a language that's developmentally appropriate for everybody. We also talked about improving communication strategies for caregivers to understand the safety protocols and support implementation of it. Each school has their communication methods, and sometimes, your kid comes home from school and they tell you something happened and that's not maybe really what happened. So making sure that the communication is consistent and that all caregivers know that their children are safe at school and here is the information that is being provided. So making sure that we have those communication strategies in place so that administrators aren't having to think on their feet in that moment to respond to the situation, that they have resources available to them as well. The code of conduct, the code that Trish referred to earlier, recommending that the district gather comprehensive feedback, not just from staff, but from caregivers and students as well, to make sure that everybody understands this code of conduct that has been drafted. Recommending implementation of listening sessions for staff, recommending established communication channels for caregivers and students. So again, kind of piggybacking off of that previous slide. And then also recommending that the code is available in multiple languages in both print and audio prior to the implementation of it so that every family has the knowledge of what the expectations are for school safety and student behavior in the classroom. So that's all that we have. Are there any questions for Dr. Eidsness? Or myself or Trish also.
Smooth.
Thank you for that report. We all know that safety needs to happen before children can learn. So thank you for your work. That's so important. I know that ALICE training is a national program, and that you work on that with the police department. Is that fair as well?
So yes, we did select it, but our police department has been very supportive. We work with Nick Chunnis, who is in charge of our SROs. They sent, I think, 3 to 4 SROs last year and will send another 3 this year. And so I think it'll take us 3 years to get all admin trained in our buildings and our SROs through the Train the Trainer program.
Nice. Okay, so expounding on that, so with the ALICE program, those are national programs, and your survey questions are also tried and true from a national perspective. So can you talk to me about the difference between UCARO versus CPI and the percentages of holds that have gone down since we used UCARO?
I might need some backup from our team, but with CPI was really to be if you needed to I mean, there's de-escalation, but how to hold a child if a child had to be restrained. UCARU has probably taken it to another level, saying that we have a different strategy we can try before we'd ever put hands on with a child and still keep everyone safe. So they had a little more reflection on keeping the adults safe through a different strategy. I think Shannon, I don't know if you have anything you could add to that one?
Yeah, I've been through both of CPI and UCARU, and I would say UCARU also emphasizes the trauma, approach, which was a recommendation from the safety committee, and just understanding trauma and trauma response. And it's really a majority of the training, and then the use of the pads is just one component. Same with CPI, but the goal there was to go into a hold. The goal with UCARU is to not go into a hold. And so we've actually used UCARU modules with our staff, not the pads, but to train our whole staff on that trauma-informed approach. So it's quite comprehensive.
Thank you. I think UCARO is a great investment for the district because
Agreed.
it's really helped our students, and I think we need to celebrate that.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
for your work.
Yep.
Dr. Gandhi?
Most updated, like local data might be different, but on the UCARU website, they feature Fargo Public Schools as a case study that was published in October of 2022. So just starting from when we started in 2019 to that date of October 2022, what they're showing is that we as a school district showed a 67% restraint reduction.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Gandhi?
My question is, I guess, for any member of the safety committee, I saw one of your recommendations focused on aligning the questions that we have for students around safety. I believe like going into next school year, 2 of our safety questions that we're looking at on our climate and culture survey are around, does my learning, do I feel safe at school, sense of belonging, is my learning impacted by others in the classroom? Is your recommendation to keep with those questions or change those questions? And then I guess my second question would be, we only give that survey 3rd grade and up. Did the safety committee discuss that they would like to get a safety measure for kindergarten through 2nd grade, or only just stick with 3rd grade and up?
So I'll answer the first part of it. Our understanding, as my understanding as a member of the safety committee, is that a lot of the questions came from Cognia, and so some of them weren't in there for that age group, so we want to make sure that the district adds in so that each grade level or each group is being asked the same question. So we wouldn't eliminate any of those safety questions. We would just want to make sure that they're aligned, that we're getting data from all of the stakeholders. And then we did not necessarily talk about that, I recall, the K through 2. But I think if you ask questions in a developmentally appropriate manner, that I think it would be beneficial for the district to have K through 12 data plus caregivers and staff members.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that I think when we use the Cognia tool, it was made for 3rd through 5th grade. So we followed that. Does not mean that Cognia also allows us to make our own survey. So we have kind of an open blank slate. If we'd like to try something else, we might have to consider the method for K through 2, and it might be more of a teacher reading questions and we're marking smiley faces or sad faces. But those are things that we can discuss that we've seen some other districts try with our younger population.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Clark.
Curious to hear maybe how the committee specifically approached or plans to in the future approach what I think is probably the most obviously concerning piece of the climate and culture data, which is around secondary students. I didn't get a really direct sense of how the committee may have addressed or attempted to address that in the report, but could you speak a little bit more on that?
Can you specifically tell us which question you're referring to? Is it the first one where there's like 37%?
I am safe at school. Secondary students agree 37%, strongly agree 10%. That's less than half.
So I think I might have Tristan come up also for this question. One of the pieces around that is probably bigger than the safety committee, but we had each building dig into the data with each principal to go through it. But we did think it was important that we actually examine that because it was lower than expected. So that would, I don't know if that changes our survey, but I do know we are, as Tristan works with the principals, looking at that. So I'll kind of turn it over to him.
Yep. So first of all, this year was the first year we've given a comprehensive climate and culture survey of this magnitude with these type of questions. After each administration, we've met with the principals. I do a check-in and basically data dig with the principals, and the principals are actually action planning around the survey results. I think what we'll see from the survey is for a safe academic environment to be had, there has to be a positive climate and culture. In order to have a positive climate and culture, you have to assess what your current culture is. If I'm standing here today saying that we are just now at the point where we're analyzing comprehensively our climate and culture with these type of survey questions, then we're just at the beginning stages of being able to dissect what needs to be done in order to improve it. But what principals have committed to, and you'll see in the strategic plan as well, of being able to annually, well, we give the survey twice a year now, a fall and spring. And at the end of each administration, what we do with principals is basically do a check-in, like talk about strategies, what's going, what they're going to do differently, what action steps they have in place to be able to address it at the campus level. And so really from campus to campus, it can look differently, what it takes for students to feel more safe. And I think the most important part of it is we're cognizant of how students feel at each individual level. And if you look at the open response, they'll tell you why. And they'll tell you what does it correlate to. And a lot of times it correlates to, like, you know, my learning is affected by the behaviors of another student, which is also now reflected in the strategic plan and something we're tracking year after year. And I think a lot of that work in making the climate and culture more robust and the questions we're asking during the comprehensive review, all of that stems from the conversations that's been having at the safety committee. So while we don't directly address like what are the next steps or what are the next recommendations for the district, I think the fact that we have done a deep dive in the root cause analysis and be able to dissect our survey questions, and we have this comprehensive data to look at and analyze, stems from the work of the safety committee.
I probably should clarify that this is the fall data that we have, because we didn't have access to when we wrote the report for the spring yet.
So yeah, so historically, our climate and culture has been given one time a year, and so now it's given in the fall, and then it's given again in the spring. So for here forward, moving forward, we'll have 2 data points for climate and culture data. And so the data reference in this document is from the fall data. And so hopefully when we present to you again, we can show movement of how students felt, because we've had those conversations with principals action planned around it. And then we gave another administration of that same climate and culture data this spring, survey this spring.
Yes, Dr. Gandhi?
This is essentially our third iteration of the safety committee, which started, I think, in 2017, 2018. At a time where just across the nation, we were seeing a lot of students coming in with higher adverse childhood experiences whose trauma was manifesting in a way of just a fight or flight syndrome, where they're showing acts of aggression and physical violence just as a way of processing their trauma. Then through COVID, we kind of shifted the purpose of the committee a little bit, and then now we're kind of going back to that safety piece. During that time, obviously, we're seeing a lot of conversations around just online safety and digital safety for students, and that becoming a threat as well. Is the primary focus, what we're seeing now, or members of the safety committee, still related to physical violence, or is it kind of shifting in terms of what is considered to be unsafe for students, or where they see their biggest threats for students in our school buildings?
I can start us off and then people can add in, because I've been on the committee the entire time. It was very much focused around students getting physical with an adult in the room is where we started. And developing, and that's where UCARU and some of these pieces came in. We have broadened because now we're bringing in safety, emergency management, and some of the other topics. But, not surprisingly, but the code of conduct has been a large piece because, again, for consistency across the buildings. And so it's been very valuable to have a mixed group of educators in a room to be able to review and give feedback on some of the pieces that we're working on, including the listening session, which is broader than the committee we have. But I will say that one of the pieces is that consistency is needed for our system to be strong. And so I think we are at a broader place, but I will say I do think it shows growth that now we're really working on being reflective after a hold or any of those pieces with both staff and students. It used to be more one-sided. So I'll let anyone else add.
I'm going to jump in real quick. So I'm the staff member that's quoted at the end of your report, actually. I didn't put my name on there, but I said I would own it when we were here. And honestly, this year, I feel like we've made the most growth because we started with the definition of safety. For a couple of years, I really had no idea what was going on, to be honest with you, because we were just looking at numbers and we weren't really looking at protocols or policies or what was being done. And so we spent a lot of time researching safety. Like we spent an entire meeting where 18 of us or however many there were pulling information and we were talking about and discussing safety. And so I think Dr. Gandhi brings up a good point online. I just asked Tristan, is that part of the code? Okay, probably not yet, but I think this is a learning experience and we're going to always be exposed to more things. One of the things that Trish mentioned right away at the beginning is that we know that preventative measures and students belonging is our greatest way to connect and keep schools safe. And from just the building that I work in, I know that we're working on those things. We're working on building relationships with kids. We're working on helping them have a sense of belonging. And as Tristan said, I'm sure every building is doing something. Do I know what every building in the district is doing? No, but is that something that the safety committee could look at next year and gather some of that information and get feedback so that we can have that as part of the report? So it's not outlined in there. Any safety committee member probably wouldn't be able to tell you what every school is doing, but we do know that there is that preventative approach and creating a sense of belonging. And I don't know if people don't bring up topics like online safety, right? Are we going to always think about those things? And so it's important that we have these surveys and maybe even have some open-ended questions on there that people can bring forward more information so that the safety committee can review that information and look at it from each viewpoint through that safety definition lens so we can continue to grow. So while it might seem like we're at a standstill, we've made a lot of growth and progress this year that I'm proud to be a member of the safety committee and actually question and analyze things. And it's a very open group. When you have assistant superintendent sitting on there and the director of educational justice, that you can challenge them and ask them tough questions and say, you're missing survey questions that we need data for. We can do that in the committee. And so I think we can continue to grow in that area.
Just as I was reviewing my notes, this is very important. I think once we got our definition, a lot of things really clicked for a lot of us who have also been on the committee for a while and I didn't know what we were doing. But a lot of those things really clicked and now has pulled me very strongly to the committee and excited to move forward and to ask some of those tough questions and to feel like because this is our safety committee definition and this is our view of Fargo Public Schools, how we want our kids to feel, we can ask those questions in that environment. So speaking for the committee as a teacher, being as a wide range of us on there, it has really given some of those tough questions a spot. And so that commitment and passion to be on this committee has really strengthened with that definition. So I do think there will be a lot of more work that you will see address some of the questions that you've had.
Ms. Nelson, you had a comment?
First of all, thank you for building the baselines for this, because I think that's really where you need to start. And excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. I would like to see future reports on the progress from fall to spring. And I would also like to know how IEPs play into the code of conduct, because those are so different. I would like to see some of the action plans after your surveys in the fall, just some examples. And then also maybe consider having some subcommittees about elementary and secondary, or IEP and non-IEP, because IEPs really play into this a lot, at least from my observation. So just a request from this board member, I would like to see the progress you make over the year.
Yes, Ms. Day?
Thank you. Thank you for the thorough report. That means a lot. My question is, how many students in elementary school and secondaries, staff and caregiver, how many of them have answered the questions that you provide here? Some of these.
So elementary 3 through 5, close to 3,000. 6 through 12, almost like 3,500. Parents over 1,000. Teachers over 1,000. I don't have the specific numbers for me. Moving into next year under the strategic plan, the expectation, the goal is 90% of students and staff complete the survey. You'll see that in the strategic measures. In terms of the parent participation, we're looking at a year-over-year increase. So that's something we do want to see to make sure we have some statistically significant data, and being able to get responses from a large percentage of our population. We've already even looked at some of the barriers, because if we're not doing anything with the survey data and it's sitting on the shelf, then that's going to discourage parents, students, staff from even participating. I think through these conversations, I don't know how many board meetings we've sat in that survey results have come up. And I think as people keep hearing that we are looking at them, we are referencing them, we are using them to drive the work forward. Parents' voice are being heard, students' voices are being heard, teachers' voices, staff voices are being heard. I believe we'll see an uptick in participation in how we use the survey results. And so I think that's something that's really important to us, but we're glad. The participation that we did get in the fall, we're glad we have that as a launching point. And right now, with the spring administration, we're looking at being able to beat what we did in the fall. So it's looking good.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. And I'm just, just looking at this percentage that came in. I know that there's a lot of work ahead, and I'm not going to be critical off of it, because I know that this is it's not only the beginning, but it's also the progress that you guys are making. Because for other people, they can look at this is not good. It's really concerning of the percentage that are coming in. Because for me, I'd be like, oh my God, my child is not safe into the school system. And then I can say, as a mom, when my child come to me and be like, Mom, I'm not safe in school, and then I'm looking at this data, it's like, oh my God, there's a lot of work that need to be done, and our children are really being afraid at being in school systems that they are not being protected, it's not good, but I do have, I'm gonna give you your prop that you did an amazing job and for presenting this. And then I agree with Ms. Nelson. We want to see that action plan, how to move forward to make sure that our school is safe, and because that's what we want. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there are not any other questions, I just want to thank everybody for your work on the committee and your really informative report that clearly everyone dived into. So thank you so much. Okay, we will be moving on next to our consent agenda, and I would look for a motion to approve. Yes, Ms. Day.
I would like, sorry, I actually have a cold. I would like to approve.
Sorry, Jess.
I would like to approve the consent agenda with additional of human capital report or or addendums.
Second.
Thanks. Moved by Ms. Day and seconded by Dr. Newman. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Then we will move right into our board business. Our first item is 7A, our board outside liaison assignment review, which comes to us through memo number 126. At this point, this is informational only, so I just wanted to thank everybody for your thoughtful responses in filling out the survey about your liaison assignments. And because there's no technical business before us, I would just open it up to any comments or questions about each other's survey responses. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, then we will move into item number 7B, which comes to us through memo number 127. And Ms. Brandner, would you like to introduce this for us?
Yep, President Berkland, members of the board. As you are aware, on December 13th of 2023, this board entered into a purchase agreement with the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center for the sale of the old district office location. Since then, we've done 2 previous amendments extending the closing timeline. The second one was due to the need to vacate certain easements that are located at the site of the property in order to clear title so that we can pass it to the buyer. Ultimately, we were hoping to be on the agenda for the city commission in the May month, but we have been postponed until June and July. We are on the agenda, and I am told if it passes, it will be signed July 8th, which means we can move forward with closing by July 15th. Therefore, you have in front of you the third amendment to the purchase agreement extending closing until July 15th of 2024.
Thank you so much. To kick off our discussion, I would entertain a motion. Yes, Ms. Nelson?
I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the execution of the third amendment to purchase agreement with the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center of Fargo Moorhead for the purpose of real property located at 415 North 4th Street, Fargo, North Dakota.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Ms. Nelson, seconded by Ms. Christensen. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, it appears we're ready for the roll. When you're ready, Ms. Campbell.
Day,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Berkland.
Yes, motion carries, and we'll move on to our final item of business, 7C, our first reading of the long-range facility plan, memo number 128. And Dr. Gandhi, I would look to you for introduction.
Thank you. I'll just provide a quick introduction and then hand it off. As board members are aware that we as a district have engaged in a long-range facility planning process, utilizing a steering committee that the board approved that process for. Initial pieces of the long-range facility plan were presented to the board at a work session, and hopefully the 200-plus pages in your packet gave you ample information as well. One of the things that was discussed earlier this year at governance was just doing a 2 reading prior to the approval of the long-range facility plan to allow feedback and to allow for rich discussion and board members to even come back and ask specific questions that may be answered as well. So today is just information. There wouldn't be a motion that we would seek, as we would seek approval at the next meeting with the next reading. And I'll hand it over to James to present members of the steering committee who can walk you through the plan.
There we go. Hello, thank you. President Berkland and members of the board. The plan that is being presented today is the result of, literally over a year worth of work from FPS staff, from consultants, and most importantly, from our steering committee. I think the main outcomes of this plan are providing physical spaces that are functional, equitable, and capable of supporting high-quality learning environments for all students. You will notice that since our work session last week, there have been some minor adjustments based on the feedback we received. We'll dive right into the history. Just to give a brief overview of how we got here. May 9th of 2023, The board approved a team led by SEH for facility condition assessment and capital planning services. Through that, we did an extensive study of all of our facilities, looking at their condition, what space we have, and if it was appropriate for the programming we were providing, and our energy efficiency at those buildings. On August 8th, once we were getting close to substantially completing that work, the board awarded the contract for long-range facility master planning to who at that point was known as Cooperative Strategies, has since changed their name to Wolpert. So if you see those two names, they are the same organization. And if you'll remember, one of the things that we appreciated the most about Wolpert was their commitment to facilitating a community-led planning process. And I think that we have absolutely achieved and held true to that intent in developing this plan. On August 29th of 23, the board reviewed the process. So we talked about the steps that would be taken from then until where we are today. On October 10th, when we were substantially complete with the facility condition assessment, the energy audit report, and the educational adequacy study, the preliminary findings were presented to the board. And then in the fall of 23, a steering committee was formed to start this important work. And just a few things there is, it's amazing. We were given guidelines for forming the steering committee. There's sort of the targeted range of number of people on the committee, and also the backgrounds and the contribution and this different stakeholder groups who wanted to make sure we engaged in this committee. We had over 100 applicants for a range of 40 to 60 spots that we had on the steering committee, and we invited 60 people. Since we had over 100, we figured we might as well invite as many as we can have on the committee. And at the first steering committee meeting, we ended up at 56 members. The members of the steering committee include 2 elementary, a middle school, and a high school principal. It includes staff from FPS, a couple, including a custodian and an employee of ECSE. We have representative from the city, from parks, from the chamber, NDSU, and other organizations. We had 24 parents that represent a evenly distributed North, South, and Davies regions. So those are parents of students who attended elementary, middle, or high school in those 3 feeder patterns. We also included students and teachers and trustees. It was a very well-rounded and very intentional that it well represented the community and the stakeholders of Fargo Public Schools as we went through this process. And that's where I'll back up for a little bit and we have a couple steering committee members. We have Darcy Bakagard, who was an at-large, and Travis Christensen, who's our principal at North High. And yeah, with that, I'll hand it off to you. And I want to first say thank you to them for being here tonight. We were fortunate. We had 4 representatives at our work session who did a fantastic job, and we have 2 of the 4 here who I'm very excited to hear them talk about the plan and some of the major actions that have been proposed as a part of this plan.
I'm Darcy Bakagard, community member at large. I'm the parent to 3 future Fargo Public School children who are 4. Thank you for giving us the time tonight. This was also a perfect excuse for me to not attend toddler soccer. So this is lovely. As you can see, there were 6 in-person community input sessions, as well as 11 in-person focus groups. I'm not going to read all the dates and locations there. In addition, the district conducted 2 different surveys to receive community input. One of those surveys had over 500 responses, another over 2,000 responses. I point to the volume of this work because this really was at the heart of what the steering committee members talked about as we met in our breakout groups. There were a lot of conversations about the volume of responses. And one of the things that was most apparent and heartwarming was how much people in this community care about their kids and other people's kids. And the passion came through in those survey responses, and that is what guided our conversation. Originally, the steering committee only committed to 5 meetings. A 6th meeting was added because there was so much conversation and a clear decision for a couple specific sites could not be reached. And so more community input was sought, and that information was brought back to the steering committee. The long-range planning process, the team met with all of you, they met with the executive staff. In addition to that, there was a website available and open to the public throughout the entire process that had all of the data that the steering committee was looking at. In addition to the specific district data, that website also housed some very important education impact surveys at large that talk about the benefit of having mixed schools, of having people of different socioeconomic levels mixed together. It included the impact of school buildings on student outcomes. So there were some general nationwide surveys that were included on the website as well. And while that was not the primary driving factor of our discussions, it did inform what we were talking about and how we approached those conversations. We presented that information to you last week, and Travis is going to share the highlights of that plan.
Thanks, Darcy. Update from soccer, still no goals.
Thank you.
Yeah. But my name's Travis Christensen. As James alluded to, I get the opportunity to serve as principal at North High School, but also in the capacity of parent, as my wife Ann and I are parents of 3 students in the Fargo Public School System, 1 at Ben Franklin and 2 in Longfellow Elementary. So my portion tonight is kind of walk through a handful of the rest of the packet, which is has a lot of information in it. So it's just going to be some highlighting of some pieces here. And so really, I think the key as we look through these is, as Darcy alluded to and as James mentioned, that that really wide-ranging group that met on those 6 occasions and took that feedback and tried to process through that really had, I think, 2 pieces really in mind as they tried to make decisions and have conversations. One is, what is the current needs of our portfolio of buildings currently? But beyond that, also looking at what are the future investments that are going to pay the most dividends to not make sure we're just solving an issue that is right now and needed later, but is solving an issue and potentially setting us up for decades to come. So with that, a handful of items that stand out in the information that you have in front of you today. And I'll just go through a couple of the different projects. And the one is, we'll start with, is a proposal for a new middle school on the north side of town. Of course, that currently is Ben Franklin Middle School. The committee had a lot of conversations about where this could potentially be, where the best fit would be, if there is a need. I think it was clear in that group's conversations that there was a need that was shown. And really the McKinley Elementary site was where this committee landed with its most consistency, is what might be a best spot for that particular build. So a couple pieces with that, and some of these will come in the subsequent proposals as well. But there is a lot of deferred maintenance right now on a variety of our buildings, chiefly those that may be older in age. So in this particular site, that is really a $45 million deferred and upcoming maintenance need that is sitting there right now for our current Ben Franklin Middle School. So when we look at the potential of not only meeting that need, but also at the end of that, with this proposal ending up with a new middle school, again, for hopefully decades to come, but also just a physical site. One of the limitations of Ben Franklin currently is the physical site that is on. And so the group really felt McKinley offered obviously things that could provide better parking, student drop-off areas, other amenities that would make that a more advantageous site for that proposal. The second piece on our list is a rebuild of the current Washington Elementary. And probably the key in that piece is the proposal that that rebuild would not only house Washington Elementary students, but also the students at McKinley Elementary, as in essence, McKinley and Washington would merge, and that would be housed on the current Washington site. So as we mentioned earlier, there is some maintenance needs that are upcoming in the tune of around $30 million. So that proposal not only hits that, but does leave the building, leaves a new building that really I think would be much more advantageous in the district's portfolio of buildings rather than just fixing up where we are at. Because part of what this does is also provide the potential for a 4-section school. And some of the benefits of that is just some operational efficiencies, some collaboration abilities that not all schools in the current setup separately are able to have. In addition to some staff travel being cut down, lower energy costs, and things of that nature. And then the last one that I'll touch on before handing it back to Darcy is Clara Barton and Hawthorne Elementary. Clara Barton and Hawthorne are one of 2 paired elementary setups currently in our elementary set of buildings. Of course, the other one is Horace Mann and Roosevelt. But for Clara Barton and Hawthorne, the committee had a lot of conversation about really when we look at educationally, both for students, but for families and staff as well, there is a benefit to bring those 2 sites together under one roof, to be able to be more efficient, more collaborative. Clara Barton also does provide some existing portions of its structure that would be able to be kept, repurposed, and utilized in this potential proposal as well. So with that, I'll hand it back to Darcy to talk through just a couple other proposals from the committee.
Thank you.
Yep.
Of course.
Are you going to be covering some new ground that we didn't do at the workshop? Or is this a mini thing for the public that might be watching?
Hi, thanks, Jim. So what we're going through now is certainly a condensed version of discussing the major actions that we did talk about at the workshop. At the end, there are some timeline notes that may be a little unique from the workshop, but a lot of the information has been heard before.
Be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Dakota High School Adult Learning Center rebuild at the current Agassiz site. The site was very important to the attendees. $31 million in maintenance needs while getting the program, the building and the space that it requires. It stays close to public transportation. Any questions about Dakota High or the Adult Learning Center? Next, the recommendation is to consolidate Horace Mann, Roosevelt Elementary, and Madison Elementary. This became a big topic of conversation because of the role that those schools play for their communities. And so this, though, would be a dramatic enhancement to educational adequacy, safer drop-off, secure entry, true cafeterias, accessibility, and would eliminate $37 million in deferred maintenance. As Travis mentioned, better collaboration for staff, for students across the board. In order to address the concern about vacating Madison Elementary School, that site would be repurposed as the self-directed academy. This is a change from the board workshop last week, that the self-directed academy would move into Madison, and then as that academy was growing, they will assess whether or not to build a new space or to remodel, assess as needed as the program continues. So that was one change recommended based on the board's input last week. Rebuild Lewis and Clark Elementary and construct a new early childhood education center. Same site, separate entrances. It eliminates $21 million in deferred maintenance while also improving parent pickup, drop-off, and establishes a dedicated facility for early childhood special education that can maximize some existing resources in the Explorer Academy while also maximizing staff resources in running that facility.
So a component that runs throughout all of those items, specifically on the elementary pieces of it, is the recommendation that the district does engage in a redistricting boundary study, just to see kind of what that looks like. Specifically, it would be throughout the district, but I think the specific area of interest would be on the north side where there is some of those consolidations. And if that were to start in the spring of 2025, our thought, from what we are understanding, is that would provide necessary time to plan and prepare families should there be any need to have students potentially attend a different school than maybe what they would be in its current boundary map, since those boundaries would be changing with the changing of schools.
And we talked a lot about the major actions in phase one, because that is what would be worked on over the next 5 years. We do have phase 2 and 3 that we're being mindful of, that there are other needs as well, that we're addressing as many of the more critical needs right away. But we do acknowledge there are other challenges in the district as well, including the enrollment in the south region of the district. So we do have the potential new middle school at the south recognized in phase 3, the self-directed academy, the permanent home that has been moved to phase 2, and then a potential for the need to do an expansion at Longfellow. It acknowledges that we are taking our capacity in phase 1 across all our buildings on the north region of the district. We are lowering the capacity because we have a lot of underutilization in buildings, right? But we are getting to about that target between the 3 elementary schools of around 88%. And we would have some opportunity if enrollment did grow in that region. So moving on to funding, there are 2 major funding recommendations. One is a bond referendum that would support phase 1. This is the financial, one of the financial asset of the community at approximately $300 million in projects that were just spoken about in phase 1. Those dollars are in 2025 dollars as far as the value of the dollar and appreciation, or escalation of costs and all that. They're all consistently in 2025 dollars for consistency's sake. The other funding mechanism that is discussed in the plan is the building fund and its utilization. And the recommendation with the building fund is to exclusively use it for maintenance and upkeep projects, as opposed to borrowing against it to complete new schools or major renovations of schools. And the main benefit of that is it would maintain the financial stability and long-term savings by preventing cost repairs. Basically, we can be more proactive with maintaining our buildings. One of the benefits of that is right away, it increases the amount that we can spend on our facilities annually on taking care of maintenance, but it also increases over time as the existing debt matures off of that fund. So the recommendation there is basically to set a policy on how to utilize maybe adapt or adjust the current policy to reflect that suggestion, which would recommend, a minimum balance level as a safety net, but also would encourage that as long as there is deferred maintenance, especially critical and high need maintenance, that we are using those dollars available to address that, and that be the building fund's first priority. As we get closer to wrapping up, one of the statistics here that I would just say I think we're all kind of proud of is the plan support. We did survey our full committee that was in attendance at the April 16th. There is one typo that's been found in the memo that'll be corrected before next meeting. Is the last steering committee meeting was on April 16th, not the 17th. But we asked the committee how they support the plan, and this was a anonymous live survey, and it's pretty incredible that we had 43% of the steering committees at the last steering committee meeting fully supported the plan, 46% mostly supported, 11% partially supported, and 0% minimally or did not support the plan. And you definitely had a lot of variety of voices and concerns and perspective. And as intended, it was a well-rounded group of individuals here. And to get a group like that to end on this sort of note was very rewarding at the end of the process. So we're very proud of that. As far as timeline moving forward, the next board meeting will be the second reading of the study. We'll keep it even shorter since we've been here now a couple times and went through it. If approved, the next steps would be to continue engage with Wolpert to study and collect data on the bond referendum and the feasibility, the timing, just to provide the board all the information that you would need to make a decision on if and when a bond referendum would hit the ballot. And the second thing that the approval of the plan would kick off is we would post an RFP to begin the process of developing educational specifications and doing a pre-design for the projects in phase one of the project. The ed specifications work to make sure that as we go forward with major projects, and not only the ones in phase one, but even ongoing maintenance and upkeep of buildings, that we have a set, very well-defined set of standards that we know what our adequate space sizes are, what the adjacencies are, what types of flooring should be in certain areas, all different types of things that go into designing a building, so that we ensure that as we design some of these major projects, as we do remodels, as we do flooring replacements, as all these different things come along, that we have this very well-defined set of standards to lean on as we engage with different vendors and design firms and all that going forward. And then the idea of going through with pre-design, and we'd hire one firm to do the pre-design for these projects, so that when the time comes that a bond referendum is called and we do start moving forward with these projects, that we have some of the visuals, that we have the the schematic level design of what is being proposed. And that we can just continue to effectively communicate what the community is signing up for. So with that, we will stick around for any questions that you may have.
Yes, Mr. Johnson?
I don't have any questions for you guys. You can go ahead and sit down if you'd like, but I do have some discussion for the board because I think that's where we're at here. One of the pieces, Dr. Gandhi, that I'd like to see before I can vote on this next week, well, next meeting, two things. If page 30, which has to do with the district-wide redistricting and the reallocation for the building fund going forward, is part of the motion, just so you know, I'll be voting no. And so you understand why. The building fund created Kennedy Elementary, Jefferson Elementary, Carl Ben Middle School, Eagles Elementary, Bennett Elementary, Ed Clapp Elementary, and Davies. I take it back. Jefferson was the building authority. So I'm not against this idea of using the building fund for deferred maintenance, but casting that lock on future school boards is a huge, huge mistake. If the bond referendum doesn't pass, we still need to build the new Horace Mann Roosevelt Madison. And we actually have the capacity to do that today in the building fund. So I love this long-range facility plan. I really, really do. I just don't know that it's gonna all happen as fast as we'd all like it to. That'll be up to the public. And if the public says no to the big referendum, does that mean we don't do anything? No, it means we tackle the biggest needs first and go down the line. So I'm hoping next meeting, page 30 is not actually part of what I'm voting on. There are additional recommendations, They're not the long-range facility plan, I don't believe. The second thing I think I need to know, not necessarily to support this, but to know about the bond referendum, is what does that mean to the annual tax bill for a homeowner per $100,000 of their house? Put it into dollars and cents that my neighbor is going to understand before we'd even think about taking that out to them. Because if it's $20 per year, most of my neighborhood would hug us and say, go forward. If it's $2,000 a year, they're going to tell me to take a hike. So I think we're going to need that piece of data. So that's my thought for this. I want to thank the steering committee. I want to thank Wolpert. I want to especially thank James, because this is tremendously solid, good work for the future of Fargo.
Yes, Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah, I want to echo Jim's gratitude for the members of our steering committee that, I mean, over 6 meetings and 6,000 pages worth of data that they've processed, and many community feedback. Jim, thank you for starting this conversation. This is exactly the type of conversation and discussion that we want, and why I think the 2 reading process is beneficial. I think, just out of clarification, because I think really just we can create the plan based on what the board views. Your second recommendation on wanting that the financial impact of taxpayers if we were to go to a bond, absolutely we can do that. And as you know, as a district, we'll have to get some people to do that work as well. There's a chicken and the egg situation, which I think I would just like to clarify here too, is the board's vision of separating or can you vote on the plan and then later determine if we're going to the public for a vote or not? Because I think, so your first feedback on the building fund will then dictate what we are able to do when we go to financial agencies to look at our capacity and then determine phase 1, right? Because if we're not using the building fund for just maintenance, then that's gonna change up what we can borrow and so forth. So pieces have like a slippery slope effect. Not that we can't do the work, but I don't want to go and then get a number on a tax number and then we approve the plan, but then we decide that the phase 1 projects are a little bit different, and then the community is used to seeing X amount of dollars for impact, and if that changes up or down, that could be a little problematic by the time we go for a measure 2. So I think my first question is, does the board view the plan independent of their decision on us having to go to the public to execute the plan? Can you vote on the plan without knowing whether or not we have the financial capacity to go to the board in any phase?
Mr. Holden?
I guess when I look at this plan and I read it, I see that we're gonna vote on the logistics of what we need to do to our buildings to bring our building portfolio to what we would like it. I think that should be the first part. Then we can decide how we pay for it. I don't think we should lock ourselves in necessarily how we're gonna pay for it. I think we need to acknowledge that these needs we have at the building level, and we need to do something about giving ourselves a plan to guide us as a board when we start talking about our buildings. I like the idea of being able to tackle all of our maintenance needs that we need to and not leave any stone unturned, but I still want the flexibility in our building fund to do what we need to do as things arise, and just basically make the best decisions with taxpayer dollars that we possibly can. I'm seeing, to answer your question as this board member, I'm seeing this as 2 separate things. Let's vote on approving the plan, and then let's figure out how to pay for the plan. That's just one of 9 of how I see what we're going forward. So I obviously like to hear from everybody else, but.
Ms. Nelson?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. The building fund piece was a huge departure on what we do. And in fact, to take this down another level, if we were to look at going for a bond referendum, I would expect that we don't need as many mills levied in our building fund if that were to pass. And so I would like us to analyze, if we get this bond referendum passed, lowering what we levy in the building fund, because we won't need 26.4 mils just for maintenance. Now, would that handicap us? Yep, it would. But if we get the okay from the taxpayers on a bond referendum, I think that's what they're asking for anyway.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Johnson?
Well, if I didn't make myself clear, Rupak, I would want to vote for this long-range facility plan. I'm not prepared to vote for how we're gonna fund it.
Perfect. So we will present to you the facilities plan. And I think just going back to like past actions or words, financial plan, we may figure out afterwards, but the facility plan is just figuring out what is the scope of work for the district that has been identified by the work of the steering committee in terms of our future building needs, whether it's related to ongoing maintenance or future project needs to meet our goals. And then later through, in collaboration with planning committee and everything else, we can kind of figure out the financial aspect of it. So next week, when we bring this back to the board for a vote, what you will see is just the facilities portion of the plan. The financial conversations obviously need to happen adjacently, but they're not going to be embedded or baked into the plan. That's my interpretation of this conversation, if that's correct. I see Ned's head's nodding, so thank you.
Sure, Ms. Nelson.
Quick question, and I didn't have Darcy Bakagard's contact information, but could I ask you a question, if you don't mind? Sure. While you're walking up, you were one of the community members that don't have children in the district.
Correct.
As far as the process itself, do you feel that there was a good cross-section on the committee? I know you put a lot of work into this, but then also how do you feel good about the receptiveness of the public surveys on the committee? Do you feel that there was a good slice of the community input prior to going to an actual vote?
Yes, overall, especially with the addition of the 6th meeting, that giving that extra time to get community input was very helpful and vital. My understanding, was not at the community feedback group, so I can't speak to the cross-section of people who were in attendance at the individual focus groups. The committee itself was a wide range of business people, stay-at-home moms, parents, past, present, former students. I don't know if all of the minority voices in the community were able to participate, and there are myriad reasons why that might be: language barriers, ability to have childcare. This was a group of people who were available and could step away from their families and their family responsibilities for that amount of time. However, I do think that that was addressed by having strategic focus groups in those communities and in those buildings to get feedback from those communities for the steering committee. And there was very strong advocacy on behalf of those neighborhood schools.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you so much, and thank you, board members, so far for the discussion. I think it goes to show how we can benefit from a lot of institutional knowledge. My thought for this evening, and Ms. Bakagard, you kind of started to touch on this, is I first want to commend everyone. This has been an unbelievable lift, and I think everybody has been doing an incredible job. I also love that we have had so much information publicly available since the very moment that this plan was voted on. We were voted to move forward with this last year. I think we all process information in different ways, and my hope was that we were able to have an oral summary of what the plan would look like, because I think that's important for community members that, as you said, might have some of those barriers to attending several of the steering committee meetings or the focus group. So I wanted to make sure that our community could see in a snapshot what this sounds like. And that was my purpose for asking that you attend, and so I just wanted to thank you for doing that. Other comments? or questions? Mr. Clark?
I'd like some clarification from Mr. Johnson. Page 30 contained recommendation for studying boundaries and potential redistricting, and you said you didn't like that entire page. Are you, do you have a concern about the plan necessitating redistricting as well, or were you mostly concerned about the building fund part?
Mr. Johnson?
I actually believe this is something the district does every year when needed. So again, I don't actually think it's part of the long-range facility plan. I think it's part of operating a school district as populations move throughout it. Since I've been on the board, I'm going to just hazard a guess that we've only changed boundaries a dozen times. Not always through the whole district. Sometimes it's 2 little elementary blocks that are moved. So, yeah, I don't see that as part of the long-range facility plan. It's just part of operating a district with the facilities you have, if that makes sense. I think it needs to be done for sure.
Dr. Newman?
Yeah, thank you. Point of clarification, that did come up at our work session, and it was explained that this is different than what we do every year. Correct me if I'm wrong. This would be a more in-depth study pertaining to the changes in this plan. Am I correct in saying that? Because I had the similar concerns.
If, yeah,
Mr. Hand?
President Brickland and board members, I think, first off, part of the reason for acknowledging, boundaries and potential redistricting is acknowledging that when we talk about moving students from, say so like Washington McKinley, for example, into one building, we talk about that as students that the entire population of one building would move to another, because that's sort of a simplified way to talk about it. But it also creates scenarios where the consolidated Horace Mann Roosevelt Madison, for example, on paper, it shows that we're at 106% utilization the first day that school would open up. That is not the intent. The idea is that between Washington, Horace, and Longfellow, that we're a combined 88% utilization, and that to balance those buildings' student population and not open schools that are over capacity, that there will be a need to study that. And I believe it also stems on the idea that there are different levels of redistricting, right? I'm not sure how many years ago it was where there was a big boundary study where you bring community members in and you have basically a committee that reviews that and makes recommendations to the board. I think that may have been part of I shouldn't say think, that is part of the idea there, is that it may be an opportune time to perform such a study like that as we get to a point where schools are potentially being consolidated and there are some changes in the where schools are, what their capacity is, and so forth.
All right, Ms. Nelson?
So this is just more comprehensive, and we already have this in our long-range facility plan under our guiding principles that we would analyze this. So I would assume that some of our existing long-range facility plan would be embedded in this, how we deal with declining enrollment, growing enrollment, and so it's just a level. I see both sides to it. Does it have to be part of this plan? Not in my opinion, but I understand it's a warning to the public that we're going to have some comprehensive boundary changes. So it's really a matter of messaging to me.
Dr. Gandhi?
The best way I can say it is that they are 2 separate purposes of a boundary change. So the long-range facility plan that we currently use and the guide that we will use moving forward to, the board has guiding principles that are specific to guiding principles in response to enrollment changes. So the trigger for boundary changes there are fluctuations in enrollment and then building capacity. that would dictate the need to talk about boundary changes when those things are triggered or initiated. What is recommended in your plan here today is that this long-range facilities plan was created on, I believe it was 6 guiding principles. One included ed adequacy, building utilization, so forth. For the execution of the plan to still meet those goals, a boundary change is also needed. Boundary changes may also be needed. So they, while the general term boundary changes, yes, we do it on an ongoing basis in response to enrollment and building fluctuations. Just to execute this plan itself, we will have to look at the boundaries because obviously there's going to be some changes to some buildings in the way we're operating. And we're going to have to make sure that we're still hitting the original goals of the plan where we're hitting the utilization, the ed adequacy score, and so forth. So the boundary changes in this plan are for the purpose of making sure that this plan is executed with meeting the intended goals. Independent of that, the district will continue to look at our building enrollments and fluctuations in both building sizes, but then also our community development to see if boundary changes are necessary as well. So they are 2 separate reasons for doing boundary changes initiated by 2 separate factors. That would be the cause or the trigger for them.
Thank you.
And if I may, the page 30, the other recommendations, for example, the building fund, really are meant to be recommendations that would require more action to actually change anything. The intent behind that example is that it would go to planning, planning would review and talk. I mean, there would be a process to that approving the long-range facility plan does not lock down, for example, the building fund to exclusively be used in that way, but that it is a recommendation that requires more or further action by the board to actually make that change. And we can certainly review that language and make sure it's there in a place that is comfortable, or if the board wishes, we could remove that. I think either is just fine from my perspective.
Dr. Gandhi?
I anticipate and hope board members will get feedback and questions between this meeting and the next meeting about the plan as well. Just to kind of capitalize on something that happened with our safety committee meeting earlier, language matters and like being able to define things matter as well. And just a product of timing, we weren't able to sit down with the city of Fargo and the Fargo Park District to discuss the Define Your Neighborhood campaign that we've talked about as what is going to happen to communities that may be impacted by the plan and how do we support them until the day after the board work session. So one of the things that we realized in our meeting with the Fargo Park District and the city of Fargo was also how do we can all get on the same page terms of language. And one of the things that we recognize is that the term neighborhood is confusing because the city of Fargo is going through core neighborhood planning process and they have certain neighborhoods that we use that are also named after our schools. The Park District uses some terms back and forth. And then we have our schools that have the name that sometimes define a neighborhood as well. One of our realizations was that, as most of you know, that especially when you get to the south side of town, we don't have a one-for-one school and then what the city of Fargo has defined as neighborhoods. So one of the things that we talked about is, as it relates to Fargo Public Schools, long-range facility planning and kind of what we move forward and the 3 entities work together, we're going to start identifying geographic parameters like X street to X street and then calling it that school's community. So Madison community, Horace Mann community. That way we're not necessarily confusing it with the Madison neighborhood, which may or may not be, which may be a core neighborhood or it might have a different geographic boundary than what we're talking about in our plans as well. I think that's a very important question and delineation as you may get questions from the community moving forward too, because we know that our schools impact a certain community defined by everyone that's in that school's boundary area. That doesn't necessarily mean that's just the core neighborhood that surrounds it as well. So that's one of the pieces that we're going to look forward to doing. We are excited to partner with the city of Fargo and the Fargo Park District to make sure that not only do all 3 of our future long-range plans align, but every plan has very specific outcomes. So the city of Fargo's core neighborhood planning process, the Fargo Park District, they have very specific outcomes that they want for these different communities as well. And the next part of it is going to be to put all three plans together, align that, and work with the members that live in the community and the residents there to say, how can we make sure that the future of this community really does reflect all of these outcomes and they're working in alignment with one another while being the best fiduciaries of taxpayer dollars that we can. So that process has begun. We started meeting pretty much the day after the long-range plan, and we're going to continue that work into the summer as well.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you again. All right, with that, we will move on to our board reports. And Ms. Christensen, could we start with you?
Sure. The only real board-related work I've done since our last meeting was sitting in this room for 5 hours through the work session and the negotiations on May 28th.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
I was also here for 5 hours. It was on the 23rd, last Thursday. But prior to that, on the 21st, I attended a planning committee meeting and the health insurance committee meeting. And prior to our next regular board meeting, I hope everybody here votes.
Thank you. Ms. Gullickson?
Thank you. May 15th, I attended the NDSBA Brunch and Learn on teacher recruiting and retention. May 16th, I had the honor of attending the poverty simulation through United Way. If anybody has not heard of that, visit with me. It was a real good learning experience. And then May 23rd, we had the board work session and negotiations immediately following. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I too was at the work session. I too was at the work session. We had a governance meeting since our last board meeting. We've had a planning committee meeting. Planning visited basically about meal prices, our up and coming budget, and the standard of effort report. And our next planning meeting is June 18th.
Thank you. Ms. Nelson?
My committee liaison and correspondence report is pretty simple as well. The work session is all I attended since I got back to town.
Thank you. Mr. Holden?
On the 15th, I attended the Native American education programs graduation celebration that was at Agassiz. And the 20th had governance, 21st planning, and then spent my birthday in here for 5 hours doing the long-range facilities plan and then negotiations afterwards. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Day?
Thank you. May 22nd, I visit Lincoln Elementary School, and then also to have my lunch buddy. Kind of sad to say, you know, it's our last day of school. They're so cute. They wrote me this gloss. It's like a glossy paper with my name, and then they put acronym in it. You know, some of it is like nice, awesome, magnificent. I don't know how they came up with that, but I just thought they were pretty nice, and I was able to send a couple of pictures to Anna Marie and Dr. Gandhi and so forth. But yes, that was really, it was a good experience for me to be able to meet with these two kids. You know, every time if I miss a day, it's like, where's Miss Day? Why she's not here? So I will get an email from the principal, from one of the counselor, like, oh, your kids miss you. You know, so I want to make sure that I make that one up. And then also to just as everybody, you know, I attended the board work session for those beautiful 5 hours. Then today I visited actually Ed Claps and Carl Van. It was fun to learn more of what's going on inside. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Newman?
Yeah, thank you. I was unable to report last time, so I'll kind of do a dual report. But since beginning of May, I guess, I spent some time reviewing the standard of effort report, as that was sort of our homework for planning. I actually have that planning has met 3 times in the month of May. As was stated, governance has met as well, and I too attended the board work session. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So as everyone's mentioned, the board work session was last Thursday and very productive. And one of my liaison schools is McKinley Elementary, and I attended their music program last Tuesday, and it was Hawaiian themed and really lovely, and the music teacher did an excellent job. I also attended the Brunch and Learn for teacher recruitment and retention strategies, all planning committees we've had, and then also negotiations as well. Before we do that though, I just want to give a hearty congratulations to all of our graduates who will be graduating starting Thursday through Sunday in Fargo Public Schools. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And our next regular meeting is June 11th. It is 7:24 and we are adjourned.